Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute structural marvel that is the human skull. Now, instead of just looking at it as some static, dusty collection of bones, we are going to treat it like a complex, brilliantly engineered piece of architecture. Think of this as an exclusive, behind-the-scenes architectural tour of the human head, exploring the blueprints, the raw materials, the joints, and the magnificent facades that make up our cranial structure.
Okay, here's our quick itinerary for today. We're going to cover the basic blueprint, break down the 22 bones, check out the sutures acting as joints, and then take a full exterior walk around from the top, the back, and the front. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The blueprint of the skull, our foundational structure.
So let's clear up a super common misconception right out of the gate. You hear people use the word skull and cranium interchangeably all the time, right? Well, they're actually not the exact same thing. The skull is the entire skeletal framework of your head, all 22 bones, including your facial bones and your lower jaw, the mandible. The cranium, on the other hand, strictly refers to just the bones that directly enclose and protect your brain.
So, the crucial point here is that our architectural blueprint is cleanly divided into two major functional zones. Up top, we've got the calvaria. Think of this as the upper brain box. Its one and only job is to encase and protect that precious brain of yours. Then, below that, we have the facial skeleton. This is the highly functional zone forming your jaws, your nose, your cheekbones, your eye orbits, basically the whole shebang that makes your face yours.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 22 bones, let's look at our building materials.
There are exactly 22 bones in the human skull. That's our magic number, guys, 22. It gives us this really highly structured, finite framework that's actually pretty easy to wrap your head around once you break it down.
And at a macro level, our building materials are split perfectly into two groups. We have exactly 8 cranial pieces making up that brain box and 14 facial pieces constructing the front facade of the face, 8 and 14. Taking a quick inventory of these components, you'll actually see a beautiful symmetry to the whole thing. On the cranial side, you've got unpaired bones, like the frontal and occipital bones, and paired bones, like the two parietals on the sides. Over on the facial side, you're going to see a lot of pairs. 2 maxillae for the upper jaw, 2 nasal bones, right alongside unpaired bones like the mandible. It really is an exact, perfect list of our structural components.
All right, Section 3. Sutures, also known as the skull joints. Fibrous and totally immovable.
Now think about most of the joints in your body. Your knees, your elbows, right? They are designed for maximum movement. But the skull is a completely different ballgame. The vast majority of joints up here are called sutures. These are incredibly strong, immovable, fibrous joints designed to tightly lock the bones together. It's all about maximum protection. But there is one highly functional exception, the temporal mandibular joint, or TMJ. This is the joint connecting your lower jaw, and it is literally the only freely movable joint in your entire skull. Seriously, if you wiggle your jaw right now, that TMJ is the only thing moving in your whole head.
What's absolutely fascinating is how these sutures change over time. They act like this dynamic life cycle map. During childhood, these sutures can actually separate a bit to allow for the massive expansion of a growing brain. Plus, wonderfully, they allow a baby's head to safely compress during childbirth. Fast forward to adult life, and they become these tightly interlocked puzzle pieces. And then, as we enter old age, usually starting somewhere between 30 and 50 years old, these sutures gradually begin to completely fuse together, essentially turning all those separate bones into one solid dome. Mind-blowing, right?
Section 4, viewing from the top and back.
Let's check out the exterior of the skull.
Okay, so to standardize our view, anatomists don't just guess at the angle. They use very specific horizontal planes. Things like Reed's baseline and the Frankfurt horizontal plane use fixed bony landmarks like the lower margin of the eye socket and the ear canal opening to perfectly orient the skull. This ensures we're always evaluating the structure from the exact same scientifically agreed upon angle. It's kind of like a surveyor carefully leveling a building site before they start working.
Imagine you're floating and looking straight down from the top. This superior view is officially called the norma verticalis. It's generally this oval shape that's just a bit wider at the back. And this aerial view perfectly highlights the major vault sutures, almost like looking at a roof map of a house. You can clearly see the coronal suture running side to side near the front, the sagittal suture running right down the middle, and the lambdoid suture completing the picture at the back.
Now, if we zoom in right on where those lines intersect at the front, we find the bregma. This is the exact meeting point of the coronal and sagittal sutures. And this gives us a totally crucial clinical hook.
In a fetus and a newborn, this intersection hasn't fused yet. It's membranous and forms the anterior fontanelle, which you probably know as a baby's soft spot. Structurally, this incredibly important gap takes about 18 months to fully close up. Similarly, if we follow that midline sagittal suture all the way to the back of the head, it hits the lambda. This is where it meets the lambdoid suture. The lambda provides another vital spatial anchor, representing the site of the posterior fontanelle. Interestingly, this soft spot at the back of the head closes way earlier than the front one. We're talking typically at just 2 to 3 months of age.
All right, let's drift around to the very back of the head. This view is called the norma occipitalis. Here, the structure is convex up top and flattens out below. You'll definitely notice some prominent ridges back here, particularly the external occipital protuberance, whose most prominent point is called the inion, and the superior nuchal line. Listen, these aren't just random bumps. They are massive structural anchors. If you've ever felt a stiff neck after staring at your phone all day, well, this is exactly where those heavy muscles, like your trapezius, are physically attaching to hold your head upright.
And finally, Section 5, the anterior view, the face, also known as the norma frontalis.
So, looking at this anterior view, the norma frontalis, it's distinctly wider above and narrower down below. To really understand it, anatomists divide it into 4 distinct zones. We've got the broad frontal region at the top, the quadrilangular orbital openings for the eyes, the anterior bony nasal aperture right in the middle, and finally, the intricate lower part of the face. It's a design that perfectly frames the protective openings for our most vital senses.
Understanding the specific landmarks here really helps us navigate this facial landscape. Right between your eyebrows, actually, if you tap that spot on your lower forehead right now, you've got the glabella, which is a smooth median prominence. Just a tiny bit below that, right where the nasal bones meet the frontal bone in the midline, is the nation. Think of these as the fixed geographical coordinates of the human face.
But, there is a pretty harsh clinical reality to this architecture. The anterior bony nasal aperture is pear-shaped, and those 2 tiny nasal bones sitting right at the top bridge are highly exposed. Because of their protruding position at the very front of the facial facade, they take the absolute brunt of frontal impacts. This makes the nasal bone one of the most commonly fractured bones in the entire face. Ouch, right?
Moving below the nose, the architecture gets heavily functional. You have the maxilla, which constructs your upper jaw and literally houses the sockets for your upper teeth. Flanking that, the zygomatic bones create the strong prominence of your cheekbones. And anchoring the entire bottom of the structure is the mandible, featuring prominent landmarks like the mental protuberance, which, you guessed it, forms your chin.
But hey, a building isn't just walls and a roof, right? It needs wiring and plumbing. To achieve this, the skull is pierced by these small holes called foramina, whether we're talking about the supraorbital foramen above the eye or the mental foramen down on the chin. These precisely placed openings allow crucial nerves and blood vessels to pass straight through the solid bone, supplying all the vital tissues of your face.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. We so often think of the skeleton as totally fixed and rigid, but as we've seen, from the expanding sutures of a newborn to the heavy muscle anchors developing on the back of the adult head, the skull is incredibly dynamic. So, how does seeing the skull not as static bone, but as an evolving, brilliantly engineered architectural framework, shift your entire perspective on human anatomy? Thanks so much for joining me on this tour, and keep questioning how the amazing structures around and inside you are built.